Hello, and welcome to another episode of Writing Escapades with me, David Rawding. So, ever since I've started this YouTube channel and podcast, I've been getting DMs, emails, homing pigeons, all from authors asking to be a guest on my little Writing Escapades YouTube channel and podcast. While I totally appreciate you guys reaching out, I actually put a lot of time, energy, thought, research into who I'm going to have on a future episode. I read at least one of their books. I go through their social media. I read through their other interviews. I kind of want to be prepared when I talk to someone, and I want to ask questions that dig deep. I see it as a show of respect to them. I'm constantly checking out indie authors and traditionally published authors. And if we've interacted, there's probably a chance that you're on my radar to be a future guest. So then there's this other part of me that wants to interview everybody and help raise up our little writing community. I've actually noticed that the Twitter writing and reading community is pretty strong. So I came up with a compromise. I'm calling it author overload. The idea that I came up with was that I would post one interview question onto Twitter for indie authors and traditional authors to respond to. For those that responded, I would pick some of the responses to read on the podcast and YouTube channel. Also, I'd share the link to their books. It gives me some content and it gives them some free promotion. Win-win. So that's what I did. The question I chose to ask on Twitter was, why do you write? I honestly didn't know if anyone was going to even reply. Social media is one big experiment for me. So when I ended up with over 200 replies, I was pretty surprised. Now, I can't read all of them, but I went through and I selected 20 answers to the question, and I got their permission to read it on the podcast and on the YouTube channel. Now, just as an FYI, I haven't read any of these authors before, and I don't know these folks that well, but I thought that they put some unique answers to my questions. And again, I want to help out as many authors as I can. It's a tough gig writing books, and even tougher trying to market them. So I wanted to give some free promotion to some indie authors, and I wanted them to answer that question, why do you write? And seeing as I did get such a good response to this, I may end up making this a regular thing. So follow me and subscribe to the channel so you can catch the next author overload opportunity. Okay, enough talk. Let's start the show and hear how these 20 authors answered the question, which was, why do you write? All right, remember the question I asked? The author Twitterverse was, why do you write? I number these for easy reference, but these are in no particular order. Remember, you can find the links to the author's books or their website in the description below. Also, authors, I apologize if I mess up the pronunciation of your names. Feel free to correct me phonetically in the comments. Number 1. This one comes from Yin Leong. Yin writes, I've always had stories in my head, and it's been a lifelong dream to finally let them out, which I'm doing now. I'm living my dream. I'm 2 books into my urban fantasy series about 2 underdog feng shui consultants who handle ghosts and monsters. Sounds interesting. Number 2. This is from Christian Green. Christian writes, I write because I love it and because I have stories to share. No matter if I reach 1 million people or just one, I want to share my creative vision with anyone that wants to read it. Sounds pretty beautiful. Number 3, this one comes from Macy Lewis. Remember, the question is, why do you write? And Macy replied with, I'm blind and Shattered Hearts Book 3 in the Hidden Heart series is here. I write because I love it and I want to share my experiences in my books. Number 4, this one comes from Eric Kruger. Remember, the question is, why do you write? The response from Eric was, to entertain, not preach, educate, or enlighten, simply just a break from reality and an escape to somewhere exhilarating. Number 5. This one comes from Melissa Pyrch. Melissa Pyrch writes, I write because I have dedicated my life to supporting teenagers. As an educator, I have seen teens struggle and feel alone. This book is a labor of love. I write because books can make us all feel less alone. And that's a beautiful sentiment. Number 6. This one is short and sweet, and it comes from S.S. Frankowska. S.S. writes, "To escape this world." Matter of fact, very simple. I like it. Sometimes short answers are just as good. Number 7. Number 7 comes from author Reed Westgate. Reed says, "At the end of the day, I write because of my daughter. You see, I wanted to be an author when I was young, but I was told how the odds were not in my favor, how unlikely it was. So I took the safe route, got into accounting. 20 years later, I am giving a lecture to my daughter, Emma, on the importance of finding what makes you happy versus chasing money. She looked right at me and said, 'What about you?' It was such a gut punch. Within a year of that conversation, I self-published The Infernal Games, and she got the first copy." That touches me right here. Nice. Number 8. This one comes from Casie Aufenthie. Casie writes, "I write with the hope my words will touch someone's heart or mind. There's nothing more powerful than being able to connect with people, regardless of time or distance." I couldn't agree more. Number 9. Remember, the question is, why do you write? And the answer for this one was from Jude Hayland. Jude Hayland writes, "To make sense of everything, or try to." Number 10. This one comes from Jay Dalton. Jay Dalton writes, "In 2016, I was diagnosed with CML leukemia and was not supposed to live past Christmas. So at the age of 64, I wrote a little sci-fi book so my grandchildren would have something to remember me by. I discovered I liked doing that, and I just finished book 7. Congratulations, and I hope there are many more books to come." Number 11. This one comes from Bailey G. It's another short one. Bailey writes, "Writing saved my life." Poignant. Absolutely. Number 12. Number 12 comes from Anne Birdgenaw. Anne writes, "I was inspired at age 56 by a strange beeping in my garage. It turned out to be an old radio in a box from a deceased relative, and we couldn't make it stop. Eerie. Then COVID hit, and I had the time to write a book." Sounds pretty intriguing. Number 13. Number 13 is Gareth Williams. Gareth writes, "I write because I am grumpy when I don't." That's pretty funny. Number 14 comes from Joanne Alain Cook. Joanne writes, "My imagination runs wild, and writing the story down settles the argument of what will happen next. It's loads of fun interacting with imaginary people in imaginary situations, just like playing with action figures in childhood." Number 15. Number 15 is Jessie Mills. Jessie writes, "Because the page doesn't ask anything of you, it doesn't interrupt or answer back. There is space to tell another side of a story, reveal a hidden history, or add a new perspective on an old idea. You can paint pictures with your words." I like that. Number 16. Remember, the question is, why do you write? For number 16, Annie Pateman responded. Annie Pateman is an author, and she said, "As a 3 times #cancer survivor, I wrote to share my story to inspire people and have hope and be resilient facing life's challenges, including a sprinkling of humor and adventure. My memoir, #the strength within." Next up is number 17. Number 17 comes from Andrew McDowell. Andrew writes, "I write to give myself a purpose, to share my feelings and passions, and hopefully to create stories people will remember." Number 18, this comes from J.D. Sanderson. Author J.D. Sanderson writes, "I write to create catharsis. I love giving the imagination of myself and others a chance to flex." And as a follow-up, J.D. Sanderson writes, "I have a voice, even if no one else ever wants to hear it. I need a creative outlet. I want to write to give myself hope for the future as well. Well put. Number 19. Number 19, the author is Sharleen Nelson. Sharleen writes, "Why do I write? Because I must." Number 20. Last but certainly not least is author Kal Locksley. Kal writes, "I write because I find such pleasure in weaving tales." Okay, that's it. Thanks again for all of the authors that responded to my Twitter question. I really appreciate you guys playing along. If you want to find the links to the 20 authors that were showcased in this episode, the links are in the description below, their websites or their book links, and they're numbered accordingly. And if you're watching this and you're an author, feel free to answer the question, why do you write? That's what we want to know. Why do you write? Answer below in the comments. Feel free to share the link to your books. I'd love to see it, and I'd love to hear from you. And if you want to check out any of my books, they're all the way at the bottom of the description. So check them out. Okay, that's it, guys. I'll catch you on the next one.